Before we dive into the video, a quick word from our sponsor, TradeStation. As tape readers, we rely heavily on TradeStation for their time and sales. TradeStation offers ATC students an account representative, zero commission, and a cash reward with qualifying deposits. Now back to the video. Hello and welcome everyone to the 8th ATC Tape Reading Podcast. My name is David Torres and I've been a longtime student. A couple announcements before we get started is every weekday we have review sessions at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're free to anyone willing to come in. You can just, listen. Essentially, we're going to be breaking down the trades of the day, the information within the tape that we deemed important. And we're still figuring out logistics for live streaming. So follow us on Instagram for, live updates day to day. And with that taken care of, it's my pleasure to introduce a longtime student of ATC's, Alex Alden. Alex has been a student with ATC as long as I can remember. He was around when I was around, so he's been to a few on-sites as well. The most recent one in Orlando and a few in Miami. So Alex, how are you doing today?
Hey David, how are you? Doing well.
Good. I appreciate you coming out on a weekend doing this podcast.
No, for sure.
So I kind of wanted to, it's the student edition, obviously, so it's a little different than with Rich.
Right.
I wanted to, get some insight into, who's Alex, like what was your trading journey like? Where did you start and how did you start?
Sure. And I even talked about this with you at OnSite, but I got pretty lucky with my journey. I started here at ATC. I pretty much I was in college, and I downloaded Robinhood on my phone. And I was just interested in trading. I knew nothing yet. I just had some tickers on my watch list, and then I found ATC online, and my journey started with them a month in. I got lucky with an options play. I hit like a home run, and Rich always talks about it's always that beginner's luck. So I had a huge options play for me relatively at the time, and I was like, wow, like this is the real deal, and I got to really look into this. And after that, I took my money out of the market to focus on school because it was my last term, and I was focusing on finishing my degree. And once I graduated in 2019, I started doing it again in the summer, getting into trading. And there was the on-site event in July, and I was like, I might as well check that out. And that's where it was a big turning point for me in terms of realizing that this really is a career, that this is something you can pursue. And just meeting the vets in person, it just really made it real for me. I was like, this isn't just some online thing where you could just make some money or might get lucky. This is something where you can be a professional, you can be profitable, you can be a consistently profitable trader,
Yeah, and then from there, did you end up taking the courses after onsite or was it beforehand?
It was 2 weeks before onsite. I signed up for classes, and just seeing the onsite opportunity right after I went as well. And at onsite, I learned I'm not going to be an options day trader. So I continued working my job for another year and saved money in order to open a margin account. And when the 2020 pandemic hit, I was lucky enough to be able to work from home and also trade in the mornings, which was amazing for screen time. And also, that transition is difficult. If you're working a full-time job, you can't really, it's difficult to transition into trading. So
yeah. And now are you trading full-time now?
Yeah, I'm trading full-time right now.
Awesome. How's your trading learning process look like? I know it's been a few years now. 2019 seems like long ago. How does that process look like? How do you if you could recall, how was it a learning phase, transitioning from learning phase to making money phase? I mean, where are you on that spectrum,
Yeah, sure. Like right now, or just in general, how did it transition?
I mean, it could be both,
Okay, yeah, right now I'd definitely say I'm in the money phase,
Mhm.
but I'd throw in one more phase in there. I don't think it's just learning phase to money phase. I think there's like an emotional intelligence and self-understanding phase too, because there was definitely a good period of my trading where I knew how to trade. I just couldn't control myself or do what I wanted to do. So I'd have a good understanding of the setup, the prints, and even the timing, but I'd get caught up in my own emotional challenges.
Mm. Yeah, so that's I feel like we all go through that. So I've never really added that to that, that spectrum, but I've definitely been in that exact phase, knowing exactly what the market maker is telling us. The prints are obvious and the rules we learned 1 through 4 are very self-evident. So, what's holding you back is you. I remember a big one for me was, I feel like maybe everyone goes through this, is not cutting your losers and then cutting your winners too short.
Yeah, the cutting the winners is huge. I mean, the cutting the losers is a difficult phase for sure, but it's very simple. It's
Yeah.
you just won't succeed. Period. And that's what I learned too. Once I eventually blew up my options account too, I learned that I'm not going to be a successful trader if I just let these positions run into losses. Even if they were options back then, still you can't be undisciplined. Just let them turn into losses. But yeah, for sure. But for me personally, the biggest struggle was fighting my internal FOMO and just desire to hop into a trade. Um, and just the transition was essentially just the power of journaling and evals and looking at it and being like, look, I know these things, I know this information, I know variables that are telling me I should not take this trade right now, yet you're still falling short of that and falling to your emotions and still taking that trade when you know well that you shouldn't, and not trusting what you know to not take a trade. So
Yeah.
and there's two sides of that too. You know, I also had a hesitation issue where I wouldn't trust myself to take a trade. But once I
Mhm.
overcame that, now I had to deal with the other end of that being trusting myself to not take a trade, seeing the variables and seeing I should not look for this trade right now.
Yeah, no, I really like that point that you made where it's like, okay, you spend that year, whatever in classes initially learning this methodology, the tape reading, the print at the level, learning the matrix, learning market maker tricks, psychological levels, all these variables that just really add to creating a high percentage trade. And then after the learning phase is the application side of it. So
Right. Yeah.
before money, you have to apply to it. And then once you start applying to it, those emotions really kick in and you get all those issues where it's not holding your winners long enough, not cutting your losers at all and letting them, run massive against you. Those are the two biggest themes that I think are across all students, probably not even just within tape reading, but that's just a massive, massive theme. So now that you're trying kind of transitioning into or this money phase, what are you doing, now that's in hindsight different? Are you journaling more? Are you more aware of like, the setups? Like what is transitioned from that emotional state to the money time state? What are the
Yeah.
key characteristics?
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
I know multiple people in our chat room have read the book Trade Mindfully. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend it. It absolutely exposes you as a person and essentially just shows that we can't fight emotions as human beings and we need to be mindful of them instead. So just asking yourself questions while trading was huge for me. It's like, why am I getting this thought right now? And why am I feeling this? And when you just take that step for a second to recognize maybe what you're seeing is just an emotion trying to show you something, you know, a classic one, and I think a lot of people have this issue too, is that you'll see a stock pushing up and the first thing that just pops into your head is that number one trade, looking for that short. But I know from myself experience, I've been shaken out time and time again on a
Mhm.
stock that's just not showing that for the day. It's just not the personality. And the big transition was understanding that, okay, what I see and what I want to happen, it's not what they're showing me in the stock is going to happen. So I need to adapt to that. What I want doesn't matter. And we went over
Yeah,
that on site many times.
yeah. I mean, I've been there too. It's just we learn these setups, and it's just like the further stock gets away from where it needs to be without pulling back and building for multiple level. That's when the biggest shorts always come.
Yeah.
But then again, there's situation exceptions where maybe the market maker built hugely beforehand. So this is money time on their position. They're not going to build significantly when it's money time on their position. And if it's an exception, I mean, the buying, the off-level short-term buying is showing you that this is not going to pull back at all, and it's going to continue to push. And I feel like those little variables, two aspects,
Mhm.
especially like in the learning phase, you tend to miss, because you're focused about your trade and your number one trade. So I
Right.
mean, that's definitely a big one as well.
Yeah, they could have been building for 6 months, and today's the day to make money because there's a news catalyst and all this volume. Why would they pull the stock back? So yeah, just it can't be as simple as we want it to sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if it was black and white like that 1 through 4, where every single time it comes to level build, it pulls back, it'd be super easy. But then again, if you think about market structure wise, they can't do that. They can't
Yeah,
just build every single time they print a level because eventually those market makers need to make money on their own positions, right?
right.
So
And
we need
also
to,
the stock, yeah, the stocks we're trading are, we're looking for high volume stocks, something that has interest in it in the day. So a lot of the times the reason there's interest in it is because it's, earnings or a big gap down or something with news. And those are the times that market makers need to use that type of availability in terms of volume to accomplish what they want. And if that's making money that day, you're not going to see large pullbacks.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then you at that point you define what's the personality. Are we, exception day? Is this a hot stock day? Like that's why you got to refine, your expectations within the rules coming into the day. Kind of transitioning to on-site. We just recently, it was a few weeks ago, we were at Orlando. It was a great on-site. What takeaways were, the biggest takeaways for you from on-site? Could be, the lesson that we did, or it could be, a cocktail hour chat, any little lesson. It could be, a golf course.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say this last onsite really put me on track with how I need to be thinking, and
Mm,
the questions I need to be asking myself. But for sure, some of the biggest topics were what you want doesn't matter at all. And then the next biggest topic for me, which was huge, is that we don't need to know something right now in the moment. And in my one-on-one with Rich, just talk about that. I'm showing a very analytical type personality in the chat, somebody that needs to, figure everything out or know every little detail. And the issue with that mindset is that it makes you emotionally want to know something and take an action with it for a trade. When in reality, if the stock's just sitting in a consolidation with a complete coin flip of an outcome, I don't need to know that. And by mentally assigning that to my own head of me trying to figure that out, it's already more than likely I'm going to take an action and take a
mm,
trade when I don't need to, when I could just sit back, be mindful of myself and say, okay, I don't really know what's going on right now. And that's okay. So I could just sit here and wait for them to show me, or I can continue to scan and find a new setup that does show me clarity.
that's a great point. So pre and post on-site, Alex, describe that to us. What was your mindset going into on-site, and what was your mindset coming out? I get the whole aspect of, a lot of it wasn't, you know, in terms of methodology, wasn't learning new setups. It wasn't learning anything new. Like we've seen every single setup. The setups we trade, we have them in our classes that 1 through 4. They're all there. So how is your trading pre and post on-site, differed?
Yeah, pre on-site, it was still very although as you said, like mechanically and technically speaking, I know we understand how to trade. It wasn't about really learning something new, but it was still going into on-site way too one-dimensional and focused on my trade. Like I
Mm,
want to take a number one trade. So it was very focused on that. And there's also just not as much trust in what I wanted to, in what I was shown to do in terms of taking a trade. So on-site, post-on-site, there was much more, I had much more confidence and trust in my execution, but overall, I have much more patience in terms of I don't know anything until I'm shown something. And at 9:31 or 9:32, like pre-on-site, if I see some aspirants in a stock, I'm already trying to make a daily game plan for this when it's only been 2 minutes into the market. And now I find myself sometimes not even taking a trade till 10. And from 10 to 10:30, I end up taking 3 great trades sometimes. And pre-on-site, I'm just trying to make everything work way too early in the day and just with a
mhm.
lack of information. And that's the key, the lack of information and me trying to figure out my own puzzle when I can just sit there and wait for more information and the market maker to show me what they're really trying to do.
It seems like the patience aspect,
Yeah.
yeah,
Patience
that's
and the
awesome.
mental mindset of just understanding that I need more information to be shown for a game plan to develop. And it's not my job to figure out every detail until it's been shown to me. And it's not my trade, most importantly.
And what are you doing post on-site to like further develop, and solidify what we learned? It's not about us and our trade and our expectations and what we want. We really got to wait for the high percentage information within the tape and the mark maker's game plan to really set up, and then we follow his game plan. He tells us when to get in, he tells us when to scale, he tells us when to get out. So what are you doing now to really solidify? Are you going back to your journals? Are you still reviewing the information? Like, what are you doing to be proactive on,
So
keeping
yeah,
that mindset?
I mean, journaling is always going to be in
Mm,
part of the answer, um, but also just being more committed to the fact that I'm a follower. So what
mm,
also that can imply is taking the right shakes. Like something I would used to do is I'd see that I kind of just want to, I'd be up a couple cents in a trade and start kind of taking off around my entry, and it would work sometimes. I'd take a smaller loss because of that, but it wasn't necessarily correct because sometimes the stock would continue on to do the trade that I entered to take, but I'm in there with a half or even a third of my size sometimes.
mm.
Instead of just committing to the trust of the game plan, it's like if I get stopped out, I get stopped out. So just more along the lines of being a better follower. And for me, it's one of the biggest challenges was not letting winners run so much. And of course, I'm not going to change overnight and just come back from onsite and be a perfect trader who holds until all the price targets. But definitely getting better in that aspect of seeing this is not a spot to take off exposure. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, this can be a spot to add. Um,
Mm.
so just yeah, I don't want to be too simple in that answer, but just being a better follower, really just
Yeah,
working on
yeah.
it and going back in the journals and evaluating. Because if I used to make $1 before onsite and a trade I made $1, I'd review it, I'd journal it, and I'd look at all the variables. But overall, at the end of the day, the grade would be an A. It's like, oh, awesome, you made $1, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Now you look back at it, it's like, hey, I made $1, but why did you take 30% off here? This was incorrect. That's not right. So,
Being a little more analytical with your winning trades as well, right?
right, not outcome oriented, or yeah, outcome analytical.
Yeah, no, definitely focusing on the process. I mean, when you focus on the outcome, because on paper, your journal can be, I was up $1, but if you think about it from an execution standpoint, you could have got out maybe super early. Maybe your risk to reward didn't make sense, for the personality of the stock. Yeah, you made $1, but you got out too soon. You didn't completely follow your game plan, and the stock ended up, running another $3. And in that instance, your risk to reward, even though you made a winning trade, doesn't make sense because the next time you take that exact same trade, you have the stop loss of, whatever. If it's closer to 50 cents, then for 60 cents, then your risk to reward doesn't make sense. It just the consistency in risk to reward as well as a huge one that I see within
Right.
myself that I didn't do before on site as well, which I know you pointed recently as well. I think it was a traders exchange was, really focusing on that risk to reward aspect as well.
Right, for sure. And it's for me, and I have an example for you of a perfect example from Friday. Um, but the difficult thing for me is something I've been trying to do more is trade these if the opportunity shows, is trade these faster moving, larger spread stocks. Used to be a total weakness of mine, just not even,
Mhm.
I wouldn't even bring them up on my screen. And now what I do is I trade them with smaller size because it's about learning for me. So it's almost going back into the learning phase. It's like these stocks are outside of my comfort zone. They move fast. They don't give me much information. And honestly, they invoke fear in me. I get scared of them. So I am like, I need to understand how to trade these now. So I'm going to trade a smaller size and treat it as if I'm learning. And I took a short in SQ on Friday off of 119. There was ask at 115, and they clearly told us at a minimum the stock needs to just come back to 115 because it's the psych level. But overall, the price target's 110. Take a guess what happened. The stock went exactly to 110, and I somehow only make $3 out of it. And it's
Mm.
because there's these wild dollar bars bouncing around, and in reality, we know that doesn't mean anything. It's just how the personality of the stock, how it's trading it. And they showed us a clear game plan. But here I am once again, a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and I start going back on those old habits of like, okay, you know what? I'm up $2. Let me cover a little here. Oh, wow, I'm up a little more now. Let me cover some more here. And now, next thing you know, I'm not even trading with the market maker anymore. I'm trading my own game plan. I'm trading what I want.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's you fall back to those habits when you're in different uncomfortable setups. I find the same thing too as well. I saw that trade within itself. I didn't end up trading it, but I saw how like those swings of those bars. If you're thinking about your position, your dollar, like the pain threshold, you're like already I'm up $3, and then it goes back against me $1.50. I'm up $1. The mind wants to take that and go, but in reality, you have to really be focused on the game plan of what the market maker told you. Already he told me 115 needs to build. And
Right.
then on top of that, what is the substance on those moves up? Is it anything that's going to change the information? Is there more substance on those pull-ups or those bars in terms of accumulation to show that it's going to be an exception and run past 120? Or is it hollow? And is it just used to, entice retail to further, help their plan of bringing it back under 115 for the short?
Absolutely. And that's what it was. It was a substanceless once the trade started. All those bars up, and they weren't even bars up. They ended up closing down. It's just quick pop-ups, completely substanceless. And even if it's like, it just makes sense for the personality. It's a very thin orders out there, so they need to work it. They need to play games to get what they need,
Mhm.
share wise.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely kind of transitioning. I mean, it's still in the same lines is how do you deal with like self-frustration, self-doubt, emotional aspects of trading? You know, what is your daily process of dealing with emotions like that? Are you stepping away possibly? Are you journaling them? Like everybody has their own, method to the madness when it comes to their emotions. What is, your ideal, process with managing or, being aware of those emotions?
Right. So I used to be really, really bad about this. Um, I used to be very hard on myself. I used to get very frustrated, get very down, after a bad day, be like, oh my God, this trading thing is just a ridiculous idea, like this isn't, and I'd never get to the point where I'm thinking about quitting ever.
Hmm.
But I would just get down, just like upset at myself. And I just realized this isn't sustainable. This is first of all process. Why on earth are you entitled? Were you entitled to winning? That's no, you're
Hmm.
not. It can't be allowed. And it's just this is normal. Everything is happening for a reason. I should be losing right now today. If I lost today and made a bad trade, it's because I deserve to. There isn't any other reality of that. But yeah,
Hmm.
I used to get really down on myself, upset, and then I'd journal a lot. I'd write a lot. But now I'm much better in terms of just being mindful, in terms of the emotion, and it's okay to mess up. It's okay to have a bad trade, and frustration is just a short-term emotion. In reality, I need to look at what I am capable of and what I have done. And this short-term failure does not represent my journey. It does not represent my future whatsoever. So definitely writing. Writing is huge for me. Writing in this journal right here, just this is just essentially this is not an eval journal. It's just like almost like a journey journal. And
Hmm.
writing about emotions, writing about progress, writing about setbacks, things like that. Um, so just really having that one-on-one time writing, it's almost just a therapeutic way of kind of calming down a bit. But also stepping away for sure. If you've really just like you get that tunnel vision on that one setup and get a little too focused, and you take two losses, maybe even three. I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to step away for a second. Um, Maybe even not even a second, maybe an hour, and
Hmm.
recollect my thoughts. But most importantly, I've noticed that when you come back, you really need to be extremely careful. At least for me personally, because I'll come back and I'll be calm, but
Hmm.
my mind still wants that revenge and to get back. So I've noticed that too. Sometimes I'll come back and make it worse. But
Hmm.
the biggest takeaway I could say is definitely just eliminating these black hole spirals of being down on yourself and being mad at myself and frustrated. It ends up going nowhere.
Yeah, no, I've been there. I mean, everything you say just resonates so much because it's part. If you have not experienced that, those emotions and that that progress or setbacks, you're not a trader at the end of the day. Like
Mhm.
what you're experiencing is the human experience of trading, and that's just how it goes, and that's the process, and that's the reality. I think really what you said, it really sparked to me was using those setbacks and those failures as opportunities for growth. I mean,
Mhm.
they're there for a reason, right? I mean, a lot of us want to look at those and be like, oh, I don't want to journal that. I don't want to even look at that. I'm moving on for the day. And I in the beginning, I would brush those aside. I'd be like, okay, it's a fluke a day, whatever. I'm pushing it aside. Um, you know, Covering those emotions and those feelings, whatever. Tomorrow's a new day. But I don't do that anymore. I really, dive into them for what they are, and they're the most opportunity for learning. If you're taking a bunch of shakes on something, maybe your read's not correct, and that opens up another door of possibilities that therefore you ask questions about to others. People who are more experienced, veteran traders, Rich, Doug, Nitesh, Donna. In our night reviews, you ask those questions and you just chip away at it. And it's areas of opportunities of growth because I can tell you some of the biggest losses that I've taken on trades setups, I can recognize them so quickly now. And it's the opposite now. They're one of my biggest strengths. So it's interesting how,
Yeah,
some of my biggest weaknesses turn into my biggest opportunities. So, I mean, that's just part of the process.
absolutely. And that's a great perspective about how it could really develop and build you. And also, just one thing to add is that's why I said earlier that I think there's not only just the learning phase and making money phase, there's also that emotional intelligence and
Mhm.
understanding yourself phase. Because when I first started and I'm committed to trading small size in a building phase, sorry, not a building phase, a learning phase, I would I'd take loss after loss after loss. I'd have like 0 for 9 days, but I wouldn't be mad
Mhm.
about that because like I'm learning. But once I started understanding and seeing that I can trade well and be successful, that's when stupid losses would really start to frustrate me a lot. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? Like, what is wrong with me mentally right now? And that's where it really became difficult mentally because it's like I know how to trade, but what am I doing? Like, why do I keep making these mistakes?
Yeah. So, kind of transitioning from that question as well is we're gonna keep this in the half hour range because I know a lot of people don't their attention's really short. So, ending question. This is kind of like a question for you. Ending journal question is: what is the biggest opportunity within your trading right now? Maybe we look back at this podcast later on down the road. Maybe after the next onsite we go to, you look back at this onsite and you use it as a journal entry, a self-reflection point. Like as you're sitting there, what is your biggest area of opportunity for growth? Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's psychology, maybe it's sizing. There's everybody's different.
Yeah, sure. So I wouldn't classify this as my biggest problem. It's more so my biggest opportunity, right?
Exactly.
I'd say sizing, but
Mhm.
specifically within identifying high percentage setups and not and the difference between 70 and 90. Because if I'm taking 70% with my normal size and I see 90, why shouldn't I be pushing myself on that? I should be. And that
Mm.
statistically just makes sense for me to increase my size on that. And that's what's happening is like I'll have a winning trade, a 70% setup winning trade, and I make $1, and then I have a 90% setup, beautiful, probably even higher percentage than that, but a very high percentage setup, and I'm also taking the same size and it's also the same winner. And it's just like I can really expand and grow as a trader to really understand where it's the difference between, okay, this is a trade we take and this is the one where you throw the kitchen sink at it and
Mm.
really trust your setup and your edge.
So it really comes down to like getting so refined with your percentages to be able to just be automatic to the point where like I already know the size I need to take on this position because it's this percentage. And that's something I feel like resonates with me as well. Is that is one of the I feel like the later key parts, once you're into that money time phase, that's one of those characteristics or opportunities in that money time phase. Because I can tell you, I think identifying percentages is one of the biggest, not struggles, but one of the more difficult tasks to do because you could think you have a 90% trade, and in reality, you have a 40% trade. So really being on par and consistent with percentage wise is very, very key.
Yeah, and it comes back to like you said, journaling, because
Yeah.
the more detail I can start reviewing my journals at, and that's something also big room for growth is just going back and reviewing more weekly. And if I can get better, really take more out of my journals and really start seeing how these percents are playing out consistently time and time again, I can develop mental capital and of understanding about these setups and really see, okay, this isn't just a trade for me. This is a high percentage trade for me, and I really need to go in with my appropriate amount of increased size relative to the setup.
Yeah, because that's the only way really to define, right? You have to go back and look at the data of your own journals to really define, okay, my number one setups on exception trades are 20%. So, I'm throwing those out the window. My number one trades on something that lacks substance, say where the stock is pushing from 47 to 50 on absolutely no buying at the levels and no off-level buying, and we break above 50, my number one short trade percentages on those are about 90%. So it really comes down to really tracking and identifying the data. I'm not too big, like we're tape readers. We're not, people perceive it as data, but it's really not data. We're following someone, we're creating a story, we're identifying, high percentages based on the market makers need to do. Yeah, we have numbers running across our screen, but we're not looking at data. The only type of data that I truly identify and look at is journals. And then once you journal them, that's where that understanding percentages really, really does come
Yeah,
from.
and it's very difficult, like you said. Um, as a newer trader, you could think you're taking a 90% trade, but it's actually 40. And it was eye opening to me because at OnSite, Rich said, you can't always give a full 60% to prints alone. And if you look at my old journals, it's just like this, the second just baseline is 60%,
Uh,
and it's like, oh wow, 80% trade. Why am I losing? Oh, 75% trade, 70 trade, 80%. It's like all losses in a row. It's like, okay, well, that's just doesn't make sense. That's incorrect. And it's like, you look back at it, and especially for trades towards making the money, like number 4, number 2 trades, where they really need to build, you can't be putting a full 60% weight when it hasn't pulled back or pulled up to the amount that they showed it had to. So
yeah.
it's difficult, because it's
And,
subjective. It's your own ranking.
a cool quote that Rich kind of always throws in every now and then is, hopefully I don't botch this, but this is all from memory. It's controlling prints come in at a level, but not all controlling prints at the level are controlling. It might be confusing, I might botch that, but essentially is we can get prints at a level, but that doesn't mean they're controlling the controlling market maker that needs to, build and dominate the stock for them to make money. It could just be a few prints there and a few prints here, and it kind of references to that, that 60% aspect is, that person can, for a newer person, they'd perceive it as, oh, that's controlling 60%. But in reality, like someone, a vet and down the road is just like, that's noise.
Yeah, that's its own topic too, and noise.
Yeah, no, that's another hole right there, black hole. But Alex, I really appreciate you coming on. Kept it around the half hour range. I think it was awesome just people to see, your progress as a student. I know there are other students that really haven't taken classes or, been too involved. So I think it's awesome to be able to see not only, myself as a student, you as a student, and others as students really, really progressing after onsite. So thank you for taking your time on the weekend to come on and just, have a good conversation.
Hey, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, David. That was awesome.
Awesome, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Take care. Have a good one.